Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Your Life, Your Story, Rise Up. I'm your host, Jill O'Boyle, and I am so excited for you guys to be here with me today. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that I think you all know that I love. We're going to talk about trusting your intuition to empower your leadership. And so, as I just said, I'm a girl that loves to talk about intuition, and I thought, why not bring somebody else on that also has a little bit of experience in this and can talk to this from her own personal story and life as well. So let me give you a little bit of insight into our guest today. Our guest is Jen Porter, and Jen empowers women to elevate their leadership, deepen their impact, and become radiant leaders doing life-changing work. Like, I could stop right there, like the word radiant. I just love that word, but I'm going to keep going. Let me give you a little bit more about Jen. So she basically was, kind of pulling from her own leadership experiences in a male-dominated space. She felt undervalued, overlooked, and underappreciated for the unique style that she brought in how she leads teams. And so through a series of self-discovery work and working directly with a coach, she was able to access new level of freedom, clarity, confidence, and not only how she wanted to lead, but also the kind of life she wanted to live. And so it was through really that journey that she realized that the thing that she loves the most is developing others. I love that. So she is the founder and the owner of Transformative Coaching, where she is committed to helping women discover their unique leadership, brand, and lead with confidence, deep satisfaction, and joy. Let's welcome Jen Porter. Hello.
Hi, Jill. Thanks so much. This is great to be here.
I am so great to have met you. So for those listening, I actually met Jen through another gal that I had on my podcast. And as I was talking and we were just sharing stories after we got, ended the recording, I don't know what it was, but there was different things that this guest that I had on my podcast said about Jen. And I thought, I don't believe in coincidences, so I feel like I should meet Jen. And so here we are today after a great conversation that me and you had. That connection was a divine connection. I'm so happy that you are here and going to share your wisdom with us today. So Jen, before we dive in, let's just do that. I gave a little bit of background. There's a lot more, but just, for the listener's sake, who are you, Jen? Where are you from? What do you love to do? And then we'll dive into like this topic around intuition, radiant leadership, and all kinds of fun stuff today.
Thanks, Jill. Well, I guess my journey started in North Carolina. That's where I was born and raised, and honestly thought I would be there forever. I never really dreamed beyond North Carolina. I didn't have a lot of role models that sort of went out into the world and did things beyond the region that I grew up in. And it was a series of experiences in college and then after college that really opened my mind up to the world. So I studied abroad in Spain. That was my big first adventure, where I got a taste of other cultures and how big this world is and that it's accessible. And I never really stopped, exploring after that period of time. I did sort of settle in my first marriage and sort of built my life around being married and being, settled, and then was uprooted again when we decided to move to Seattle. And so that was a real kind of a shocking season of my life for me, because, I was uprooted from friends and family and my church community and my rhythms. But I found those in a new way in Seattle. I really started to discover myself for the first time in my 30s. That would have been. And then since then have had a lot of experiences that took me back to the East Coast. I was in DC working for a human rights organization, and then actually chose to live in Colorado with my now husband. And we've been here for about 5 years. And started my coaching practice when I was still living in the DC area. But it's this continual exploration and learning about ourselves and the world and how we want to give of who we are. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I'm excited to dive into some of this today with you.
Yes, I love that. There was a couple words that I heard as you were speaking, that is, getting settled and then choosing. And I was like, ooh, those are interesting words because, I think most of us and in 30s. So that just rings for me too. It's like, I remember reaching a point, it was, as I was approaching 30, where I thought in my own life, okay, this is it, right? This is like where my journey ends. I'm married. I have kids now. My career's okay, but it's not something I love. But I guess this is where I should just settle. And for me, I kind of like didn't really like that too much. That felt not right, but yet it was like what my mind was telling me. And so then I love the next word that you said was I chose Denver, Colorado. And so I thought, ooh, that's so good because we do have a choice. We can choose to settle in and get comfortable, or we can choose to maybe not stay comfortable. And I don't know if that's where you were going, but that's just what hit me. And so I thought, let's talk about, like, it really speaks to me as like being authentic to who we are. And I know this is something that you talk about, is like emphasizing the importance of finding ourselves. And I think that is a journey, but can you just elaborate a little bit on, your path and how you chose Colorado? How did that lead you to coaching? What's the importance maybe of tapping into our authentic style and finding ourselves? I know that's a lot
Yeah.
to unpack there.
Some of what you, yeah, no, it's all really good. So part of what was coming to my mind as you were speaking was about how we can two sort of metaphors. One is that we can sort of put our life on cruise control,
Mm-hmm.
and we find our groove, and then we just go. And it's
Yeah.
like what you were saying, like this is what life is. I'm just going to settle into this gear, and I'm just going to do this forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the other metaphor is running. It's like running a marathon. We just keep running and running and running and running. It's like, we just keep going. And, as opposed to the idea of like sprinting or doing a triathlon, something
Yeah.
that has some variety in it and making some choice about it. But I do think that we get stuck in a
Mm-hmm.
particular gear. And I think that comes from the expectations of those around us, the expectations of the world, the cultures that we live in, and how that shapes us. But for me, I don't think I felt a lot of choice in the first part of my life. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't on my radar to really choose.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the changes that happened in my life were because of disruption, because of things that were happening to me.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't feel like I was in control of my life or making, these intentional decisions. But later in life,
Mm-hmm.
after sort of this upheaval and things breaking apart and things falling apart, then it kind of hit rock bottom. And it's like, oh, I'm actually going to create the life that I want. I'm going to
Yeah.
now make some choices about who I want to be and how I want to live and how I want to give. Where do I want to be in this world,
Yeah.
geographically, and community, and in work, and all those things? So I am way more empowered now,
Yeah.
in my life than I ever have been. And that's not to say that I don't have disempowering days, because I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have
Yeah.
those moments where we feel like life is happening to us as opposed to we are
Yeah.
actually at cause of our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I can relate to that on so many levels. And, it's so true that a lot of times when we are finally able to see that we have a choice, it's through those disruptions that you just said. It's through some kind of messy part of life where we get to this point and we're like, whoa, like there's a lot of moving parts and changes happening here. But I'm going to look at this and I'm going to choose to make a change. And I see that in so many women of women that I coach too, right? We hit this part of our life where there's a lot of disruption, there's a lot of change, and it's only until we get there where we're like, okay, well, I don't have to stay here, or I guess I never realized I had a choice that I could not be in this mess. And it's in those kind of messy parts that we kind of find our way sometimes. I would love for women and everybody to not have to get to those disruptions. I would love for us to know our worth as we go about life, but so many of us don't, right? And I think maybe you can relate to this as well, but there is a sense of power when we can finally get to that point to actually know who we are, why we're here, what we were created for. So in your story, I guess just share a little bit about your background. You mentioned some messy parts of your life. What did that look like for you? How maybe somebody listening who have been in those messy parts and are ready to not stay stuck in that. As we talk about being authentic, knowing our worth and intuition, were there things that just you did to begin to know your worth? And how can somebody that is listening be able to truly know who they are? I mean, that's not going to happen overnight, but what are some things that you did that could maybe help them?
I think that we're always searching for our worthiness. We're always craving being worthy. And we'll find our worthiness in all kinds of places.
Yes, we
and
will.
So that's where we're building our life around other people and things and successes and recognition and money and all of these things. We're building our life around that, thinking that is where our worthiness is going to come from. And the scary part is when those things fall apart, then we're left to pick up the pieces, and it's very disorienting. It's scary. And so what happened for me is, I was married. I got married in my mid-20s and was really just discovering who I was at that stage. But I was in a relationship where I was being told everything that I believed and did, and the way I looked, everything was just wrong. And it was in overt and it was in subtle ways, but it was manipulative to the point where I just believed it. I just fell into that trap of like, wow, everything that is wrong is with me. It is me, and I need to change. When that relationship was severed, when he chose to leave the relationship, thank God, I felt abandoned, but what God kept saying is, you've been rescued. I've rescued you. I've rescued you from this situation. And so in that pit, then I was able to rebuild and could find my worth in who God created me to be. Yeah. And so that is where I believe that is where life came alive for me. And I also will say that was the first time that I actually experienced joy.
Yeah. Oh,
the joy came for me. I don't, when looking back, it's a fascinating thing for me to think about. I don't think I actually experienced joy until my mid-30s after my divorce. And when I found God because God became everything for me. Yeah. And when those things in our lives are severed, whether it's a job, whether it's relationships, anything, our health, when those things are severed, it really causes us to ask those questions. And so I think in our humanity, we actually need those things. We need suffering in order to find ourselves and to find out what is true and what is authentic and what is worth investing our time and our lives in. So I do think that we need those things, but the rebuilding takes way longer than we want. And so, I know people right now who are in the pit. They're suffering. They are, there are things that have been severed in their lives, and they want to pull out of that, quicker than is actually possible. But there's treasures that we find in that journey that will stay with us forever. The things that I discovered during that dark, depressing time, I still have the treasures from that I carry with me. And now I get to live it.
Yes.
I couldn't use the treasures then. They were just forming, but now I get to live out of that. And there's more that I have to sort of ground myself in my true identity so that I don't swirl, with the ways of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, God really does show us our true identity. And there's so many things that you just said in what you were just saying that I really want to break down, because the suffering, right? The pain, all the things that we are enduring right now, there is purpose in that. And so many of us want to get out of it as quick as we can. But I love how you just said that there's hidden treasures. That is so good. There's hidden treasures in those suffering moments that if you just stay a little bit longer, it brings me back to, oh gosh, it's probably been a year or so ago. But I'll never forget the sermon that my pastor was talking about in talking about suffering. And he illustrated it perfectly for us women. And so he used the description of, imagine you're sitting at the hair salon, right? And he's like, I've never been in the hair salon. I never looked like this, but I've seen my wife at the hair salon, and she's sitting there and she looks terrible, to be honest. She's got foils, he's like aluminum foil, I guess, like in her hair, like all over, right? And so he's giving this illusion, and and he's like, but I know that she would, like, as she's looking there and looking at herself in the mirror, and she's got all this stuff sitting there, like, she's gonna remain in that chair, even though it looks really, really bad right now. She's gonna sit in that chair because she knows that there's beauty forming under all of those foils. And there's something really, really pretty going to come out of this mess right now. And I was like, that is so good, because no woman is going to get out of that chair and walk the street looking like that. We're going to sit in that chair as long as it takes, as much as it costs, right?
Right.
Because we're going to look so much better coming out.
That's a great analogy and metaphor. I think the difference in life is we have the advantage of knowing what the end result is going to be.
Yes.
Because we've gone through that cycle.
Right.
And so we know that it's worth staying seated and keeping those foils in because of the result we're going to get. But when we're in a place of deep suffering and loss, and, you know, our ego is very bruised.
Yes.
We don't know what's on the other side of it. And in some cases, we are unsure we'll ever get to something good.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's where that despair happens. You know, if we don't have hope for something else to come that is good, then it's super devastating. Like, it's really hard to stay in that place, and we fight it and we resist it, and we want to pull ourselves out of it quicker than we actually need to. You know, there's a scripture, and I think it's Psalm 119, which is a really long psalm, but it says, it was good for me to be afflicted, because before I was afflicted, I went astray.
Yes.
And I think about that word astray. You know, I've always thought about that from, like, the discipline of God, you know, who God has created us to be, but really it's astray from our core identity. You know, we can stray so easily in so many ways, and it's not good for us. And so the suffering is purposeful, as you say.
Yeah. And so somebody that's sitting in that pit right now, and that's what they're longing for, right? Is a hope. There's a hope that there's a light at that end of the tunnel, but they're sitting in that pain. They're sitting in that suffering. Where do they turn? Right? What are some steps or some resources that they can have that ounce of hope that they can't see maybe right now? Maybe some things that
I think anytime when we're looking to the world to be that hope, it's always going to fall short. Even if we're looking just to ourselves to be enough, we're always going to fall short. And so for me, the only tool I have is to look to God, because my faith is everything. It's my understanding of the world. It's my understanding of myself. It's my understanding of eternity. And so everything falls into place in light of that bigger picture. And so that's all I got, you know, is to look to the one who created me, to look to the creator of the whole world, and to once again fall back in line to try to make sense from that lens of what is this story that's being told, and where am I in the unfolding of that story? You know, the story I'm talking about is what's revealed to us in the scriptures. And God gives us this entire story. We're right in the middle of it. And And so for me, it's always been really orienting to
Mm-hmm.
remember there are those that have gone before me who have suffered and been lost. And, some of those, if we read, they're heroes of faith
Yeah.
that suffered the most.
Yeah.
And so there's something eternal on the other side of our suffering that is way better than we can possibly imagine. And
Mm-hmm.
so finding hope in the word, in scripture, finding hope with others. We are
Yes.
definitely not made to suffer alone. That is a recipe for a real depressed state. And so to sort of gather ourselves around community, and I find that other people, when they're stronger than I am, they
Mm-hmm.
can do things for me that I can't do for myself in that moment, like
Yeah.
pray, like have hope.
Yeah.
And if I can grab onto somebody else's hope
Yes.
in the middle of my suffering, I can make it through another day
Yes.
until I can find it for myself again.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say that. I was like, if somebody was in the pit and they're leaning on that hope and they're leaning on God, right? That is the best thing you can absolutely do. But I love how you also talked about, and I think you have actually used these words before, is that army of advocates, that strong community around
Mhm.
you. Because I absolutely know. I mean, when I look back in my suffering and then my bottom of the lows, all I could, when you're in that kind of a moment, that's really the only person I could turn to was God, right? So my faith grew and I could lean on trusting him. But what also was really cool in that season of my life was I opened my eyes to see the connections that I also felt, divine connections and people that was coming around my circle during that season. And I think to be aware of who God is bringing in your life right now, if you're sitting in that pit, be open and curious to the people that's coming around your circle, because I bet they're there for a reason or a
Yeah,
season or a purpose that is going to help you navigate where God may be calling you, leading you out of that darkness. Would you agree with that?
absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking back to my own experiences, and there are groups of women who came around me during those um, months, years of suffering, who let me be.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't try to like, hey, just be happy, let's go do something and distract you from what's going on. They let me be sad, uncertain, devastated, you know
Yeah.
um even pitying, myself. There's a place for everything.
Yeah.
But they were there, and they didn't let me get too lost. They
Mm-hmm.
stayed around me. They had said, come join us in this. We're going to eat together, we're going to have this massive feast together, just come, you don't have to say anything, just be with us. We're going to go
Yeah.
climbing. This was a rock climbing group that I'm speaking about. And they just sort of surrounded me. And even, in places that I felt very vulnerable, they, in some ways, kind of literally embodied, like put their bodies around me to
Yeah.
protect me
Yeah.
from anything that could come against me during that time that I wasn't ready for,
Mm-hmm.
particularly male attention, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's my girl.
Yeah.
You're not coming any closer. And I needed that because I didn't have a voice for that myself yet.
Yep.
And so there's that mama bear that comes out,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
people around you. And then I had women, older women at church that, just tear, like I would just, some Sundays I would just cry, just
Yeah.
just weeping silently in the pew by myself. And women would see me and come, they would draw near and just sit and pray with me. And they
Mm-hmm.
they would pray for me in ways that I didn't have the tools to
Right.
pray for
Right.
myself
Yeah.
yet. And
Ah,
so I actually learned how to pray through women coming around me and
yeah.
helping me.
And did you feel like these kind of people were just people that you could be your true, authentic self with? Like to be able to be free of judgment in those
I'd
times?
like to say yes, but I think there is always a part of us that is guarded.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there's all We live in a performance culture, and there was there was always there was always self-consciousness of you're crying too much.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
Yeah.
pull it together. Don't
Right.
we say that
We
in our
always,
heads? It's like,
yes.
pull yourself together. You're like, you can feel the tears coming and you're like, don't you do it. Don't
Right.
like, and I have learned literally in church, because everybody's facing forward, it helps, I can let my tears stream now.
Yeah.
And just be okay. And then, if they do the greeting, it's like, turn to your neighbor,
Right.
and then the person's like, oh my gosh,
What's going on in her life, right? All the judgmental you think, right? Yeah.
But I think we learn. I think we learn how to be more free and how to be more authentic. It takes so much practice, and it takes. I think in the practicing, we have to receive the safety. We have to receive something back in return to know that it's okay to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
The worst thing is, like, there have been times where I've shared things and people couldn't handle it, and they were like, they just didn't have the maturity and the depth to be able to handle crisis or really, really hard things. And so there are people who have said things to me or just walked away. They couldn't handle that conversation, and it was really jarring. Speaking of intuition, we have to learn who our people are and who strength can meet strength, and people that can handle our anger and handle our not being angry at, I'm not saying like we're angry at them, but can handle the strength of our emotions when they're so high.
Yeah. So Jen, I know that, we've talked about your pain, some suffering, and where you were, and then divorce and finding yourself now. And then now you've moved into coaching others. And so I know one of your things that in your coaching is this radiant leader, and really helping people to be authentic leaders and use your intuition in your leadership. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about that, because this was kind of leading to that discussion of you have to know kind of your people where you can do that. But in leadership, how do you embrace that in like a leadership type role? Like if it's in work, if there's, women listening in corporate, because I believe you're so spot on. It's something we definitely have to learn, because especially as women, I think there is that voice that says, all right, pull it together. Don't show emotions. Don't really bear your true self here in this type of role. But if you're over here, you can be that. And I have learned that that's so not true. Like we should be our authentic selves. But I know when people hear that word authentic, they're like, well, you can't just be you. But I want you to talk a little bit about that, because I know you really do help women in this line.
Yeah. So many things when it comes to leadership. I think it starts with knowing what we value. What are our core values? And that's the work to do to get really clear on what matters most to us in this world, because we're always going to be behaving and responding out of those values.
Yeah.
So that's always the foundational work to do in coaching and understanding self, because that gives us a matrix. I call it a decision matrix, but it's a matrix to be able to run our decisions through those values and through those things that matter most to us, so that we can make great decisions more quickly, knowing that it's rooted in those values. So that's, I think, where it starts. Yeah. Then it's understanding how we operate. What are our strengths? Where do we come alive? Where do we feel most grounded? And operating out of that when we're leading. I don't think that we need to be 100% transparent and vulnerable all the time.
Yep.
We have to be really discerning about that. Our people that we're leading don't need us to be fully showing all of our stuff. They don't need to carry our stuff. That's for us to sort through and get healing from. And so I think we have, as leaders, we have to look outside of our organization and our team to find some strong, not that there's not resources internally, but I'm saying we have to separate a little bit and step outside, because my stuff might be bleeding out onto my team. That's not okay. And so I think about resources like mentors,
Yep.
peers that are also leaders that can help you navigate difficult things, counselors, therapy to try to heal from things. I have a firm belief that we have a responsibility to heal to the extent we can, because we are operating out of our wounds. And if that's affecting other people, then we should be accountable for our behavior. And so really getting the support by way of therapy and counseling that we need to heal so that we can show up more radiantly, more powerfully, more helpfully in the ways that we lead and operate. And then coaching, of course. I mean, I stumbled into being coached. I was at a dinner party in Seattle, and somebody was going through her coaching program, and she offered me a session, and that was my first introduction into it. And I gained something from that session that I'm still able to use to this day. And that was 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And I when I was in places in my leadership and in my life that I needed someone objective to challenge me and make sure that I wasn't operating just out of a wound, or wasn't trying to escape a hard situation or something like that. That's when I reached back out to a coach, and I needed someone to really ask me the hard questions to make sure that I was making great decisions. I think we need that pressing a little bit to make sure that we're not just, leaders have a tremendous amount of responsibility.
They do.
We can leave a wake of destruction in our path, or we can build others up. We can, we can be the kind of leaders that people are able to thrive and remember as like someone that believed in them and someone that helped them grow and develop and find their own true self. So it's a lot of responsibility, and we shouldn't take it lightly. I don't think everybody needs to be leading people.
They do not. They do not, right? I mean, God created us all uniquely with gifts that we all have. And some of those gifts, I think we are all leaders, right? But leaders of our life, but not all leaders of people. And there are people that are probably listening right now and like, yeah, I do never want to lead people. I know that about myself, right? But they are a great leader in processes, systems. They can lead people through how to work through a process maybe, but not lead and manage people. I 100% agree with that. And you can see in a corporate culture where there are wrong people in wrong seats, right? Where they have been positioned. I have seen that where somebody may be really, really great at a role in a department, and they're really good for those tactical things. And because they've done really well in that job, they immediately get, promoted to be the leader of that team. And then all of a sudden that dynamics of that team completely shift because they were never meant to be leaders of the people. They were supposed to be leaders of that tactical project per se. So I've definitely seen that in my own experience. So, to go back to authenticity, I 100% am on the same board with you as there's time and place where you shed those things, and that's not always meant to be totally transparent and vulnerable. I think leading people and being a great authentic leader is really to say, hey, I see you, as an authentic leader is really to be able to say, I see you and I relate to you. Or, I'm going through maybe it's something as easy as I'm going through the same thing, being transparent enough to tell your team that, hey, I'm up here, but I have went through those same battles that you're going through. And one, I can maybe help you, or B, like you said, here's a great mentor or somebody else for you to kind of go walk that through. You don't always have to be that person for that person. That's why there's so many people out here that are great mentors. But I think there is something to be said about accountability, coaching, mentors, through all of our life. As a coach, you need another coach because I can't figure it all out on my own, right? So I have a coach.
That's right. We need each other.
Yeah, we do. And there's
You
so
know,
much power in that.
I'm thinking about vulnerability in leadership, and I can remember with a particular team that I was managing, there was a time where I showed vulnerability, and I can remember a time where I chose not to show vulnerability. And I think there's a place for both. In this one situation, um, I was helping to empower and strengthen this particular employee to rise up, to stand firmer in her voice, to be stronger in her in what she was kind of and how she was leading the team, the business group that she was responsible for. And
Yeah.
it took a lot of courage. And I put her, in front of this group, and she was leading them, with such strength of heart, and she was giving it her all. And what I learned later is they really came down on her in this particular meeting that she was leading in a way that kind of broke my heart.
Mm.
And because I had put her in that situation, and she's relaying what happened in this meeting and how harsh the leaders were to her. And I started to cry. And it was just one on one. And she saw my tears, and she was like, "It means so much to me that you care that much, that I went through this." And I couldn't help it, really.
Right.
That was Mama Bear. And I was just like, I can't believe that, I put you in this situation, and, you gave it your all. And this was the reaction. And so then we had to clean that up, right? We had to deal with, how are we going to handle this, and how am I going to confront the behavior so that I can protect her in the future? The other situation I'm thinking about was when I was under a tremendous amount of pressure. I was in a place of, changing of leadership. There was a lot of chaos. There was some behavior that it just wasn't working, but I shielded my team from all of that. And so they had no idea what was happening up here, because I was taking the brunt of it. I was dealing with it in the ways that I could, but I shielded them from that. So they didn't need to know, because that would have disrupted their own work and their own performance. And that was an example of, we have to be discerning in how we're leading in each situation.
Absolutely. No, that's so good, because there are seasons and there's times where people don't need to know everything. And that was a perfect example where you have been put in that leadership position because you have the capacity and you're in that seat to handle those things. And that would have been detrimental for the other team to know everything that's going on. I'm sure there was things that you did in those times where to help so that they didn't know, or to just make it flow, right? I can relate to that on certain levels as well. So Jen, you have in your coaching, I know you talk about your radiant leader community. And some of the stuff that we're talking about or touching a little bit on is really to know your worth, to empower your leadership, and then help people to kind of carve that path. And so I know we've talked a little bit on some of the things, but in your community, can you talk about some of those things? How do you help leaders stay true to their core identity? We've talked about core values, which I think that is a huge thing. I think when something feels off in your leadership or your culture at work, a lot of times if you go back to those core values, there's usually, I have found in my own life, there's a disconnect in the values of maybe that culture, that company, and your own, and there could be something there. So are those things that you kind of talk about, or just maybe walk us through some of the things, exercises, or maybe some tips for people who are feeling like something is just off in their life? Maybe they're in the pit, maybe they're navigating a career change. Maybe they're feeling like they're not being themselves and they want to get back to being authentic and some of the things that we're talking about. What do you kind of do in your community that would help them with that?
So there's two ways that people work with me. One is in the Radiant Leader community, and the other is in a deeper, kind of more immersive experience, which is the Radiant Leader Mastermind. And that's newer. The Radiant Leader community is one where these are both for women who have kind of a holy ambition. They want their lives to count, and they want to live and work out of the ways that they're created to give in this world. And so it's, not just any ambition, but something that's more deeply rooted. And so the Radiant Leader community is one where we meet once a month, and there's no homework, there's no expectations other than let's just be together once a month, come together and share what's going on. And it's amazing and fascinating what happens when women come together in community.
Yes, it is.
So I'll give you some examples of some of the themes we've been talking about recently. And one is the habit that we have these habits. Okay. We have a habit of yes when it comes to other people. So, whether it's our colleagues or our spouses or, family, our kids, we have a habit of yes when anybody asks us of anything. And I think that's been, nurtured into women. It's, we are expected to be yesers, to say yes when anything comes at us. And that transfers into our work. And so aren't we the ones that are like, sure, I'll plan the party. Sure, I'll do these other things, even though it has nothing to do with my role. I'll do this. Yes, yes, yes. And what we discovered in that is that we also have a habit of no when it comes to ourselves.
Yep.
The habit of no is this knee-jerk, immediate reaction. We don't even stop to think. We just say no when it comes to ourselves. Some sort of a luxury, some sort of a something that could be for our development, some sort of investment that we want to make in ourselves. These opportunities might come our way, and it's like, no, can't do that. But we don't even stop to ask, like, would this line up with my goals? Wait a minute. What if it was a yes? What if I could do this? What would be the result? Is this the season for me to do it? And so it's very interesting for us to challenge ourselves in how are we thinking and how are we making decisions in all aspects of life, in parenting, in leadership, in community, in our own self-talk.
Yes.
In our own kind of, leading of self. How are we talking to ourselves? What's the conversation that's happening? And do we need to sort of intercept these thoughts that have become really deeply rooted habits that we don't even know we're doing? It's become so familiar.
Oh, it does. Oh my gosh. Yes. I love that habit of yes and habit of no. And it's so true. We have to often flip the script because our mind will say, absolutely not, right? I'm not going to invest that. But if somebody would to say, ask me for something for somebody else, I would immediately be like, I would totally help you with that. Or I would totally give you that money for this. Like, because I can see so much potential. Like, I would just want to give it to you. But when it's talking about ourselves, it's almost like we have to ask ourselves, how could my life look differently if I did allow myself to say yes to that? Like, what, if I just stop and just don't say no and just pause, because my gut says you instantly feel something. And I think that goes back to our intuition, right? Like, I know when I met this girl and didn't even meet her, I just saw her online from California and I streamed all of her podcasts and I was like, I need more of her. And then there was an invite, right? There was an invite to start working with her. I knew that I needed to work with her, right? But instantly my gut was like, what's that going to cost? Do I really need that? What if she'll probably come out with another series? I'll just wait and get the free stuff, right? Yeah. So immediately my intuition knew 100%. And on this one, I had done enough, I think, self-discovery tools that I finally was like, I'm saying yes to that. Because I think my life could look totally different if I said yes to that instead of no.
You know what I think happens, Jill? Such a beautiful example. I think it's just as powerful for other people to watch us do that as it is for ourselves.
Yeah.
Because
so good.
My friends, my peers, my colleagues, other people are watching me say yes to things in a new way. This year, in fact, 2024, I have said yes to things that shocked me, honestly. Yeah. I was like, could I do that? Could I invest that in my development? But other people are watching us, and it's a wrestling, right? Those same people are seeing us wrestle through it. It's not like sure, I'll do that. I have these endless supply of, time and resources. But no, these are very intentional, very thoughtful decisions that we're wrestling through because we're trying to break through those chains that have held us back. And so just
Yeah.
like you, with this intuition, I bet other people in your life are watching you, have watched you do that, even your family, even your
Yeah.
kids, right?
Yeah.
Oh, mom's doing this because she knows it's important. They're
Yes,
watching.
they are. Oh, they are. Countless times where I've heard, same thing in my coaching business, and they're like, just this past weekend, like being home for a graduation party, the people that reach out and was pulled me aside and like, I am absolutely love watching your journey. And some of me wants to say, get in on the journey. Like go with
Right.
me. Like you can do it too. Like you can
Yeah.
do, anything your heart desires. Like,
Yeah.
if there's something there, trust it. And sometimes it sounds crazy. Like the coaching for me sounded crazy. I was like, but I couldn't deny the feeling when I was like, I'm going to leave corporate and I'm going to step out on a leap of faith. And I feel like God is calling me to coach women. It sounded crazy. And all the questions from the family, like, well, how are you going to do that? What are you going to like?
That.
Yeah, the how. And I'm like, we're not supposed to know the how. We're never supposed to know the how.
You described it as a feeling. What was that like for you? How could you trust that enough to take action on it?
Yeah. So for me, it was just like you. There was a season of my life where I had to rely on God and I had to get back in touch with my faith. And the first part of that was doing the opposite of what I've been doing, which was hustling my life away in busyness and distractions and disobedience. And so I had to make a choice, just like you said, the choice was where I'm going is not leading me to where I know that my life should be by now, or not even by now. Cause I hate to put that, cause I think we do get this pressure of like, well, I should have this, right? But there was a sense that I did know deep down that I'm like, I know that this is not the path for me. Clearly not in this destruction, right? So doing the opposite was like, I am going to create some time to really sit down, be still, listen. So it was a journey of really listening finally to hearing God, talking to God, getting back in touch with that. But the feeling for me was a couple things. One, I would get an absolute like butterfly feeling in my stomach on certain things. And I would be like, what is that? And just really ask God, what is that? I also had lots of confirmations of what I would journal, what I would write down, things in the morning where I believe these network, right? These army of advocates, where then I would say something, they're like, oh, they would confirm something that I had heard before. So it was a trusting process. It was a knowing. It was also fun for me because I always knew when I was a younger child that I had this intuition. I had this thing that I would just do things and it would bring me joy. And I followed that for so long. And so it was also like, I had lost that for so long. And so it was like, finally, like, it was kind of bringing me back to like childhood days where I would trust that intuition and it would work out for me. And I was like, I'm liking this. Like when I trust what this feeling is having and I just step out and just try it, it's working. And so for me, that's what it was for me. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah. The reason I ask is because I think I think feelings do orient us and can point us like arrows in the
Yes.
direction of the way we're going to go. But there's also the other pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you challenge that feeling and know that it's not just a fleeting feeling?
Right.
And so what I hear you describing is this bodily experience too, which I think we can sometimes ignore. We've gotten out of touch with our own bodies.
Right.
And our body can tell us. The body holds wisdom too.
Yeah.
And so when you're paying attention to that butterfly feeling, if I'm tracking with you, I experience that it's a good butterfly. There's like
yes.
the hard butterflies, and then there's the good exciting butterflies.
Yeah.
But also the confirmations that you were getting, we have to be paying attention. And, we're not, intuition isn't just about, spontaneous changes in our life. It's very intentional and thoughtful and strategic, but we have to be able to go deeper than our intellect, right?
Yeah.
Go deeper to the heart, to the soul, to the spirit, and
Yeah.
really understand what am I being called to? What is my next step?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I love your point about practicing it, because you had some experience where when you followed your intuition and it went well, that gives you confidence to do it again.
Yeah.
That's what we need. We have to
Hmm.
practice it and see what happens.
Yeah. And I think leaning into fear a little bit too is like, why does this feels so aligned, but there is some level of fear here. And why does that scare me? And kind of asking those questions, right? Is it scaring
Yeah.
me because what if it fails? Okay. Or is it scaring me because I'm taking a step that's out of my comfort zone from what others have said I should do? Just asking those questions to get to the root of, is it really fear or what else is
Yeah.
going on? Yeah. Yeah.
I want to give people a tool that
Yeah.
can help when we're feeling fear. And you mentioned it earlier when you talked about writing things. I find
Mm-hmm.
that when we write down what it is we're afraid of, it loses power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because as soon as we write down, okay, what am I actually afraid of? What is holding me back right now? And if I literally write it out, I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of letting this person down. I'm afraid of, and it's kind of like, well, if that's the worst thing that happens, it's going to be okay. Even sharing that in community, sharing it with friends. Hey, this is what I'm feeling afraid of right now. And
Mm-hmm.
then kind of talking that through so that that person can help give you some perspective.
Yeah.
Coaching, I mean, that's what we do, right? As coaches, it's like we sort
Yeah.
of push that fear and say, okay, what would happen if? Okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen if you actually take this risk?
Yeah.
And then that person can understand for themselves, am I ready to do this?
Yeah. That's
And then
good.
they own it.
Yeah.
But I do find that it's very diffusing, because if the fear stays inside of our bodies and our heads, it can really spiral into something way bigger than it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why I love that tool. I love the tool of saying, write it down, like get it on paper, because it really loses its power, right? When you can see it. I've found that in
Yep.
so many things, right? In life, of just the power of journaling, the power of getting thoughts to paper, to see
Yeah.
that. So that's a great tool. And then extend it. Don't stay there. Then we talked about advocate of your army of advocates. Then get around a community, a safe space where you can
Yeah.
actually take those thoughts that were on your paper and share it. There's so much power in sharing things that are going on with the right people, right? Right people, safe space that you can trust.
Yep.
And then thirdly, I think too, so you have your own tool here. You have the power of connections and getting the right community. And then take it, if you're truly serious about wanting to get out of, to be a person who is authentic, truly to know your worth, stand tall in what you're doing, is then find a coach that can hold you accountable to doing all of those things, right? I mean, those are, I think,
Taking the actions.
taking the action. Then that's the hardest part for most of us, is actually saying, turning that hard no into a what if. Let's get curious. What if I said yes? And then actually doing it.
And let me point to why that we get stuck. It's what you alluded to before when you talked about your own experience of moving into coaching, and people around you were like, wait, how is this going to work? How are you going to do that? How are you going to make money? How are you going to, and most of us get stuck in the how. And so coaching can help evaluate, okay, what is it that you really want? And how do we create the path to get you there? Let's figure out the how together. Because
So good.
the how will hold us back and paralyze us.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if we stay by ourselves, because we won't do it unless we have somebody that's going to figure that out with you. That is so good.
Yep.
And Jen, I know that stuff, this is all speaking your language and things that you help your women. So what is, if somebody's listening and they would love to transfer into that journey, I know that's something that you can help them with. What's the best way for them to connect with you, to maybe learn more, or just get on a chat?
Yeah. So reaching out directly, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out most days. Okay. And that's Jen Porter Coach on LinkedIn. the way to sort of dip your toe in the water is to have a conversation. I'm always
Mhm.
willing to have conversations with women who are interested in, okay, what could this look like for me?
Yeah.
Could this bring me the transformation that I really want? And so starting with a conversation, the Radiant Leader community I talked about, that's sort of the another dipping your toe in the water and seeing how it feels. The deeper dive is going to be the mastermind. This
Okay.
is where it's a 3-month experience where women are diving through knowing your worth, that is your core identity. What are my values? What is your personal brand? What are your superpowers, and how do you want to demonstrate those in your work and in your life? How do you want to align your work and your life around who you are created to be?
Mhm.
Empowering your leadership, strengthening your voice is the second phase of it. And then the last phase is carve your path. So that is, instead of just doing what the world would love you to do, or reacting to whatever is coming our way and trying to mold and like a chameleon fit into whatever it is that we're being asked to do by other people, really deciding what is it that I want to pursue and how do I want to give of who I am to this world, because we've got
Yeah.
one life to live,
We
right?
do.
So
Yeah.
let's do it well. And so that's why it's like this visual of like carving out that path, your
Love
own
that.
path. You might not have seen your path modeled before. How do you want to carve your own? So I walk people through
Mm.
that experience, and, becoming radiant leaders. I mean, that is the goal.
I
And,
love
it
that.
comes from Psalm 34, which
Yeah.
is those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. So
So
that's where the name of it comes from, is rooted in the scripture. So I say a lot of the work that I do is this intersection of spirituality and leadership, which
hmm
I think is a unique offering. And so if that's, compelling for people, I'd love to have a conversation.
Oh, I love that. I love that. We are very similar in our line of work. And I bet I love the carving of your path, because I bet what you're doing, it goes back to those hidden treasures, right? There's things
Mm.
that are always hidden in our path that are leading us to where I believe we are really called to live. Sometimes we just skip over those treasures. We don't really take enough time to pause and be like, So I bet you're really unveiling a lot of those in their journeys, to carve that path forward. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So good. So good. Well, thank you, Jen, for coming on, sharing your wisdom. I will put your contact information in the show notes below. So everybody listening, please reach out, at least get connected. There's so much power in just connecting with other like-minded women, I believe. So truly appreciate your time and sharing your own personal story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jill.
Yes, thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Go out, make it a great day, and remember to be you, love life, and rise up.